The first thing he felt was pain. Not a dull ache, nor a nagging one. It was sharp, as if someone had grabbed his spine and wrung it out like a wet rag. Then came the cold. Then the rain. The raindrops pelted his face so hard it felt as if the sky were trying to drive him into the ground. He opened his eyes and saw mud. Brown, greasy mud right in front of his nose. His cheek was lying in a puddle. His hands were thin, not his own, a child's. He tried to stand up and realized his body wouldn't obey him. His knees were shaking. His fingers wouldn't clench into a fist. Somewhere behind him, a heavy gate slammed shut with a dull thud. Iron. Wrought iron. The estate's gates. He was kneeling outside, alone, wet, in a torn shirt 3 sizes too big, and a voice sounded in his head. Quiet, female, businesslike. System initialized. Critical errors detected. 847 errors. Continue. He blinked. Then again. A translucent panel hung before his eyes, blue, with distorted text. The letters floated as if the interface were being rendered on a 2003 graphics card. He knew what a graphics card was. He knew what rendering was. He knew what a bug was. He knew this because 30 minutes ago, his name had been Daniel Park, 29 years old, Seoul, game balance designer. 13 years in the industry. 40 hours without sleep before the patch release. The Hangang Bridge, a guardrail, darkness, and now mud, rain, a stranger's body. 847 errors. Continue. He clicked yes, not because he wanted to, but because in 13 years on the job, he had never once canceled a system launch without first checking the error log. The panel flashed. It displayed a list. He read the first 3 lines and froze. Host's name, Cal Ashworth. Age, 17. Level, 3. Class, undefined. Status, exiled from the clan. Health, 14 out of 14. Mana, 0 out of 0. Physical condition, thin channels, inability to absorb mana, first-degree chronic muscular dystrophy. Reputation in the Ashworth clan, -infinity. Reputation in the world, none. He stared at these lines and felt something rise in his throat, a mix of laughter and a howl. Level 3, mana 0, a body that breaks at the slightest jolt, reputation -infinity. He ran his hand over his face. His hand was small, wet, with slender fingers that had never held anything heavier than a spoon. The classic build for the weakest character in the game. Rock bottom. He stood up. His legs buckled. He fell. He stood up again. His legs buckled again. On the 3rd try, he finally managed to stay upright and looked around. Behind him was the manor's wall. Tall, smooth, with a coat of arms featuring a silver hawk. Ahead was a road, muddy, leading into a dark forest. Rain. No one around. A sound came from behind the wall. Laughter. Boyish, loud, familiar to this body. Cal knew whose laughter it was. The memories of the former owner lingered in his mind like a poorly edited montage. Fragments, flashbacks. A slap across the face at dinner. A kick on the stairs. His father's words in front of the whole neighborhood. Trash in the family register tarnishes the reputation. Cross it out. And his younger brother, Dorian Ashworth, 13 years old, level 22. A genius of the 3 elements. The boy who, since the age of 8, had used his older brother as a training dummy. His laughter echoed from the balcony. He shouted something after him. "Drop dead in a ditch!" Cal didn't turn around, not because he was proud, but because his legs couldn't turn without the risk of falling again. He headed toward the forest, slowly, step by step. Rain ran down his face and dripped from his chin. The panel hung in his peripheral vision like an annoying ad. It flashed, It demanded attention. He opened the Skills tab. Empty. He opened the Inventory tab. Empty. He opened the Quests tab. Empty. A single line at the bottom. Debug mode. Available once per day. Duration 10 seconds. He closed the panel. The forest began 20 steps away. The trees stood thick and close together. Dark trunks, wet leaves, the smell of earth and rot. Cal Ashworth's body was so weak that a branch that whipped against his arm left a red streak. He walked for 5 minutes and was gasping for breath. 10 minutes and his legs were on fire. 15 minutes and he sat down on a fallen tree because he couldn't go any further. He sat in the darkness. He listened to the rain. He thought. For 13 years, he'd been designing progression systems, experience curves, balance tables, formulas for mob kill rewards. He knew every way to break an RPG by heart. Combo stacking, low-level mob arbitrage, threshold exploits, farm loops through junk quests. And now he was sitting inside a system that looked like it had been written by a drunk intern on his last day before getting fired. 847 errors. This isn't a system. It's a disaster in a pretty wrapper. Something jumped in the bushes. He flinched. A frog leaped out of the wet grass, green, the size of a fist. A marsh frog. It sat on a rock half a meter from his foot and stared at him with round eyes, blankly, indifferently. It croaked once. The panel reacted immediately. Creature identified. Green marsh frog, level 1. Kill reward, 4 experience points. According to the balance table, 4 points. He looked at the frog. 4 experience points. He needed 250 to advance to the 4th level. That's 62 frogs. At his current health, he'd die of exhaustion first. But he had to start somewhere. He picked up a stick from the ground. Wet, rotten, too heavy for these hands. He took aim. The frog wasn't moving. He struck. The stick hit right in the center. A wet sound. The frog stopped moving. And then the panel exploded. It didn't flicker. It didn't beep. It exploded. The entire screen turned gold. Text scrolled by so fast he couldn't keep up. The sound in his head was as if someone had struck a gong the size of a mountain. 1 million experience points earned. Level 3. Transition. Level 91. 47 skills unlocked. Attention. High-order observer interference detected. Autolog activated. Report generated. Sending. He stood there with a stick in his hand. A dead frog lay before him. Green, wet, about the size of a fist. 4 experience points according to the table. 1 million in reality. He slowly lowered the stick. He looked at his hands, then at the frog, then back at his hands. He knew this bug. He'd personally patched one just like it in 2019. Rarity table inversion. When the system confuses the direction of values and starts thinking that the weaker and more ordinary the target, the greater the reward. He'd written a 40-page report on this very bug himself, and now this bug was his life. He sat back down on the log. His body was buzzing. It didn't hurt, it was just buzzing, as if every cell were rebooting. Level 91, 47 skills. He opened the list. Enhanced body, shadow step, mana reading, iron skin, second order regeneration, sword mastery. Skills poured out like loot from a broken chest. Half of them were combat skills, a quarter were magical, the rest were crafting skills. He scrolled to the end. The last line. Debug mode enhanced. Duration 10 seconds. Cooldown 24 hours. He closed the panel. He sat there for a minute. The rain hadn't stopped. Somewhere far away in the infinity of space which had no form or color, 3 entities opened their eyes simultaneously. They hadn't slept for 1,000 years. They hadn't woken up for 3,000. But now, a red line from 4. Anomaly in Sector 14. Level 1 Swamp Frog. Reward 1 million. Carrier Cal Ashworth. Level 3. Current level 91. One of the observers turned to the others. Something in reality had just broken. Cal knew nothing of this. He sat on a log and stared at the dead frog. Then he stood up. His legs were no longer trembling. His body was still thin and light, but his muscles obeyed him. His joints didn't creak. His breathing had evened out. Level 91 was doing its job even in a body with thin channels. He wiped his face and set off down the road. 20 minutes later, a light flashed between the trees. Warm. Yellow. A window. A sign. The letters were worn but legible. The Slanted Candle. A tavern. The tavern door was heavy. Oak, with an iron handle shaped like a candle. He pulled it open and stepped inside. It was warm inside. It smelled of smoke and cooked meat. The room was small. 6 tables. 2 were occupied. 3 men with red faces and mugs sat by the wall. By the window sat an old man with a pipe. Behind the counter stood a woman, a little over 30, dark hair tied back in a bun. Her hands were red from work. Her eyes were tired. Her apron was stained. She looked up at Kel and he saw her face close off, instantly, like a shutter. Another beggar. Another problem. A number hung over her head. 0. Goodwill. 0. And next to it, a line, a hidden flag. Her daughter is sick. The doctor charges 8 gold pieces. Martha has 2. He walked up to the counter. He asked for a bowl of soup. He said he'd pay a copper. The woman shook her head. She said she didn't have change for a copper, that they owed taxes, that she had no time for vagrants. She told him to leave. Cal didn't leave. He looked around. The counter was old. The wood was cracked. A bent metal fork lay on the edge, one of those used in this world to stir soup in a cauldron. Long, with 2 prongs. He picked it up. Martha flinched. She thought he was going to steal it. But he sat down on a bench by the wall and began to take the fork apart. His hands moved of their own accord. Not Cal Ashworth's hands. Daniel Pack's hands. 13 years at a table with prototypes. Thousands of hours assembling test devices to measure balance. His fingers knew what to do, even if his muscles were weak. He straightened the prongs. He snapped off a piece, bent it, twisted it. He used the edge of the table as an anvil. 3 minutes, maybe 4. A small mechanism lay on the counter, spring-loaded, with a lever, with a platform for bait. A mousetrap. There were no mousetraps in this world. He knew that from Kel's memory. Rats ate a quarter of the food supplies in every house. They fought them with cats. Cats cost money. There was no money. The rats ate. A vicious cycle. Martha looked at the mechanism on her counter, then at Kel, then back at the mechanism. He told her to take it to the pantry. She placed a piece of cheese on the trap's platform. She waited. Martha picked up the mousetrap with 2 fingers, like a poisonous snake. She went into the pantry. Silence. 20 seconds. A snap. Sharp. Dry. She came back, the mousetrap in one hand, a rat in the other. Dead. A big one. Martha's hands were shaking. She placed the rat on the counter and looked at Cal as if he'd just pulled the sun out of his pocket. The panel flashed. Favor, Martha Finch. 0. Transition. 34. True motive revealed. Lily's daughter, 6 years old, suffering lung disease, 12 days remaining. Communication skill unlocked. Sheltercraft level 1. Threshold 20. Reward received. Recipe. Warm chicken broth. +2 to recovery for children. He looked at the recipe. Chicken broth. Specific ingredients, specific proportions, specific cooking temperature. +2 to recovery. For a 6-year-old girl with lung disease and 12 days left, this wasn't medicine. It was time. Each serving gave a little health, a little strength, a few more days. He hadn't set a mousetrap. He'd set a mousetrap for Martha, whose daughter Lily was dying. The system could tell the difference. He knew this because he'd designed such mechanics himself. Targeted help for a specific person yielded a reward. A general good deed yielded nothing. Martha set a bowl of soup in front of him, a full one, bread, a piece of cheese, and a dime in return. His hands were still shaking. She said one word. "Thank you." Then she added, "Son." And Cal realized that in all 17 years of this body, no one had ever called him that. He ate the soup, hot, thick, with potatoes and carrots, the best soup of his life, in both lives. As he ate, he thought, 12 days, Lily Finch, 6 years old, lung disease. The doctor costs 8 gold pieces. Martha has 2. The tavern tax is 43 gold pieces. 27 days left. Baron Cedric Holloway, level 47. The Ashworth family's second cousin. He'll be touring the villages in 27 days. Pre-rupture tax, 200% of the usual rate. The entire village of Meadowbrook has 180 gold pieces with a quota of 600. The price of failure. The village will be burned down. The women will be sold to pay off the debts. The children will be taken to the mines. And his father, Magnus Ashworth, personally sent a letter to the village. Do not lend money. Do not provide medical care. Do not bury the dead. Cal finished his soup. He wiped his mouth on his sleeve. He looked at Martha. He asked permission to spend the night in the corner of the hall. She nodded. He lay down on the bench, hard, short. He closed his eyes. The skills panel hung in the darkness before his inner vision. He opened the skills tab. 47 of them, mostly combat skills. Iron Skin, Shadow Step, Mana Burst. Powerful, useless. Because he couldn't display them. The rule of visibility. His true power was registered in the level seal only if other people saw it, but as soon as a witness appeared nearby, his apparent level instantly dropped to whatever they would believe. Around peasants, he looked like a level 5. Around an aristocrat, like a level 15. Next to an inquisitor, he looked like a 3rd level. Real blows were dealt at the real level. But if he exceeded the plausibility threshold by more than 20%, the Church of Balance would receive a signal. The church that quietly executes those whose growth appears suspicious. So no overt violence, no feats for the public. Everything through disguise, everything through craft. He doesn't kill the demon with a single blow. He accidentally drops the cart he repaired onto the demon. He closed his eyes and smiled for the first time in 2 days. 12 days. 27 days. Level 91 hidden inside a body that looks like a level 3. A broken system with an inverted table. A recipe for chicken broth. And a mousetrap made from a fork. It was the worst starter kit in RPG history. And the best. He woke up to the sound of a cough, not his own, a high-pitched, wet, childlike cough. Coming from the room behind the kitchen. It was dark. The coals in the fireplace had almost gone out. Martha was standing by the door, holding a little girl wrapped in a blanket. A tiny pail with dark circles under her eyes. The girl was coughing as if her lungs were trying to turn themselves inside out. Martha held her close and rocked her. Above Martha's head, the number 34. Above the girl's head, a number. 0. A name, Lily Finch. 6 years old. Condition, lung disease, progressive. Time left without treatment, 11 days. Yesterday it was 12. Cal got up from the bench, quietly. He walked over to the kitchen. Martha looked at him in alarm. He said he needed a chicken. Carrots. Onions. Garlic. Salt. Clean water. A heavy-bottomed pot. Martha watched him. He said he knew the recipe, that it wasn't medicine, but it would help, that he needed 3 hours. Martha was silent for 10 seconds, then she showed him where the pantry was. He simmered the broth until dawn. The recipe from the system was precise down to the gram. Temperature, cooking time, the order of adding the ingredients. He did everything with hands that trembled from exhaustion, but he did it right. At dawn, the broth was ready, golden, clear, smelling so good that the 3 men at the table woke up and began to sniff the air. He poured it into a cup, a small one, a child's cup, and took it to Martha. Lily was sitting on her mother's lap, her eyes half closed, her breathing raspy. Martha took the cup, looked at Cal, and brought it to her daughter's lips. Lily took a sip, then another, then another. She drank the whole cup. And a minute later, her breathing became more even. Not healthy, just more even. The wheezing hadn't gone away, but it had grown quieter. Lily opened her eyes. She looked at Cal, she looked at her mother, and she said she wanted more. By the third day, Lily was sleeping without coughing, for the first time in a month. Martha stood by the door and watched her daughter curled up under the blanket. Silence. No wheezing, no moans, just the quiet breathing of a sleeping child. Martha wiped her eyes with her apron, quickly, roughly, like someone who had forgotten how to cry and was angry at herself for starting again. Cal sat behind the counter and kept track of the numbers. The broth was working. +2 toward recovery per serving. 2 servings a day. In 3 days, Lily's condition had improved from critical to stable. The prognosis without treatment had shifted from 11 days to 22. It was time. Not medicine, time. But the medicine cost 8 gold pieces. The tax required 600 gold pieces for the entire village. The village had 180 gold pieces. 24 days until the Baron's arrival. He looked at the numbers and did what he'd done every workday for 13 years. He crunched the numbers. A mousetrap made from a fork cost nothing. The materials were free. It took 3 minutes to make. Rats were eating up a quarter of the food supplies in every house in the village. There are 32 houses in the village of Meadowbrook. If every house sets out 2 mousetraps, food losses would be cut in half in a week. That's a savings. But savings don't create money. Money is created by sales. There are no mousetraps anywhere in Achilleone, not in a single village, not in a single city. He checked through Kel's memory. Rats, an age-old problem. Cats, poisons, magical traps for those who can afford them. Mechanical traps don't exist. Patents, monopolies, the market. He did the math. The cost of a single mousetrap using a fork, 0. The cost of making one from an iron rod, a quarter of a copper coin for materials. Selling price, 2 copper coins apiece. That's a conservative estimate, maybe 3, but 2 to start with. 32 houses, 4 mousetraps per house, 128 pieces, 256 kopecks, 2 gold coins and 56 silver. Not much, but that's just one village. Within a day's journey, there are 3 villages. Within 3 days, 9. Rats are everywhere. Demand is endless. Problem. He couldn't make 128 mousetraps a day. His fingers were tired after 10. He needed a blacksmith. The panel flashed. Skill unlocked. Business acumen, level 1. He closed the panel. He stood up. He told Martha he was leaving for the day. She nodded. Lily woke up and asked for some broth. Martha smiled. Her first smile in 3 days. Maybe in 3 months. He walked along the road toward the neighboring village. The rain had stopped that morning. The sun was warm. His level 3 body was still weak, but level 91 was working inside him. His muscles didn't ache. His breathing was steady. His stride was even. He could feel the difference. It was as if you were wearing a suit 3 sizes too small, but inside that suit was an athlete. Limited, yes, but functional. The village of Creston was a 2-hour walk away, smaller than Meadowbrook. 20 houses, 1 street, a blacksmith shop on the outskirts. He saw the blacksmith shop from afar. Smoke from the chimney, the sound of a hammer, rhythmic, confident, a good sound, the sound of a master craftsman. Then the sound changed. The hammer fell silent. In its place, voices, rough ones, 3 of them, and 1 more, a woman's, angry. He moved closer. 3 men stood at the smithy door, large men in leather vests with badges. The guild. He recognized those badges from Kel's memory. The Artisans Guild, the regional branch. Dues collectors. One of them was holding an iron plate in his hand, the master's brand. A girl stood before them, 18, maybe 17. Rust-colored hair, a burn on her left forearm, broad shoulders, hands covered in soot, a blacksmith's apron. She was screaming that the mark belonged to her, that her father had bequeathed it to her, that she had a right to it. One of the collectors said that a woman wasn't entitled to the master's brand. A second said that if she didn't pay the fee, the smithy would be sealed off. The third just stood there, grinning. The girl swung her arm. The first collector struck her in the face with an open palm. She fell. She got up. She swung again. The second collector punched her in the stomach. She doubled over. The street was empty. Not a single person. Everyone knew you didn't argue with the guild. Cal stood around the corner of a building and watched. A name hovered above the girl. Penny Callahan, level 14, favorability -5, hidden flag, father deceased. The guild is taking the smithy. The illegitimate daughter of the head of the capital's armorsmiths guild. -5. She doesn't like snobby aristocrats. He couldn't intervene openly. The plausibility belt. Any action above level 5 in front of witnesses would trigger an alarm. He looked up. On the roof of the house next to the smithy stood a barrel. A rain barrel. Full. Perched on the edge, held in place by 2 planks. One plank was cracked. He picked up a stone from the ground. Small. Smooth. He took aim. He threw it. The stone hit the cracked plank. The plank broke. The barrel tilted. 100 liters of cold rainwater poured down on the 3 collectors from a height of 2 stories. The impact was so strong that one of them sat down on the ground. The second dropped his branding iron. The third slipped and fell face first into the mud. Penny was standing half a meter from the impact zone. Dry. The pickers were floundering in the torrent of water and mud. They were cursing, trying to get up. Cal came around the corner. He walked over. He picked up the branding iron from the ground. He held it out to Penny. She looked at him, a wet teenager in a torn shirt, with thin arms and a face that showed not a trace of heroism, only calm. She took the branding iron. She said she hadn't asked for help. He said he hadn't helped. He said the barrel had fallen on its own. The collectors stood up, wet, angry, but without proof. The barrel had fallen. The plank had broken. Rainwater, an accident. They left. They promised to come back. Penny looked at Cal. -5 had become -3. Not much, but it was a step in the right direction. He pulled a sheet of paper out of his pocket. Crumpled, wet around the edges. It was a sketch. He'd drawn it at night in the tavern by the light of the embers. A spring, hardened, coiled, with the number of coils and the diameter calculated. In this world, they didn't know spring steel. They knew sword steel. They knew shield steel. They knew nail steel, but not spring steel. He placed the sketch on the anvil. Penny looked at it. She picked it up. She turned it over. She studied it for a minute. 2, 3. Then she looked up. There was something new in her eyes. Not gratitude. Not surprise. Interest. Professional. Eager. She asked where he'd gotten it from. He said he'd come up with it. She said it was impossible. That steel doesn't work that way. He said it does if you harden it at the right temperature and cool-tempered in oil instead of water. She fell silent. She looked at the blueprint again. Then at him. Then at the forge. She said one word. Show me. The panel flashed. Penny Callahan's approval. -3. Transition. 7. Heading correct. They worked until sunset. Penny stoked the forge. Cal explained the principle. He didn't give orders. He explained. The difference is important. She was a craftswoman. He was a theorist. She knew metal by touch. He knew the formula. Together they made their first spring by noon. Crooked, weak, but it worked. The second one turned out better. The third was nearly perfect. By sunset, they had 12 springs and 4 mousetraps of a new type. Not made from a fork. Made of steel. Reliable, fast, with a mechanism that could kill a rat the size of a cat. Penny held the 4th mousetrap in her hands and looked at it the way other girls look at necklaces. Cal sat on the threshold of the smithy and drank water. His body ached. Level 91 didn't change the fact that his hands were those of a 17-year-old boy who had never done any physical labor. His fingers were swollen, his palms were red, but he was smiling. The panel displayed Penny Callahan's favor, 7. Transition. 22. Skill unlocked. Blacksmithing, level 15. Threshold 10, cleared. Penny revealed the secret of her brand to Cal. She told him that her father had received it from a master in the capital, that the brand was genuine, that the guild wanted to take it away not because she was a woman, but because the brand was linked to a name that was worth more in the capital than this entire village. She didn't say which name, not yet, but she'd said enough. Threshold 20. The communication skill was unlocked. Blacksmithing level 15 after a single night's work. He walked back to Meadowbrook in the dark. The road was empty. The stars were bright. He thought about numbers. 12 springs a day, 4 mousetraps. If Penny made the springs and he assembled the mechanisms, they could produce 20 a day, 140 a week, 2 copper coins each, 2 gold and 80 silver a week. In 3 weeks, 8 gold and 40 silver, plus sales to neighboring villages, plus a premium for uniqueness. A realistic projection for 24 days, 350 gold. Not 600, not enough. But he hadn't accounted for the crossbow mechanisms yet. On the 7th day, Lily got out of bed on her own, without help, without support. She simply threw back the blanket and put her feet on the floor. Martha dropped a plate. The sound of shattering clay filled the tavern. Lily looked at her mother, then at the shards. Then she said she wanted to watch Uncle Who Repairs make mice. Martha sat down on a chair and covered her face with her hands. 10 seconds. Then she stood up. She swept up the shards. She poured some broth. Life went on. The panel displayed Lily Finch's status, stable. Treatment-free period, cancelled under current protocol. Sheltercraft level 4. Lily Finch's favor, 0. Transition. 41. Cal sat at the table assembling mousetraps. Lily sat next to him on a stool and watched. She didn't interfere. She didn't touch anything. She just watched, with her huge gray eyes. Sometimes she asked a question. Why does the spring wind in this direction? Why is the lever this long? Why does the bait have to go in the center and not on the edge? The questions were good, precise. A 6-year-old girl who a month ago was dying of a lung disease was asking questions an engineer would ask. Cal answered, patiently, in detail. She nodded. He showed her how to set the lever. She tried. She got it right the first time. He showed her how to check the spring tension. She checked. She found one that was weak. He wouldn't have found it. The panel flashed. A new line appeared above Lily's head. Hidden class, resonator, ability. Here's the system's numbers, the only one in the world besides Cal. He froze. He reread it. Resonator. Lily could hear the system. She didn't see the panel the way he did. She heard it. Numbers, values, parameters. To her, a spring wasn't just a piece of metal. She could hear its characteristics, strength, elasticity, lifespan, as if they were music. That's why she found the weak spring. She heard that it didn't sound right. He looked at the girl, 6 years old, pale, with slender hands. Her nose smudged with soot because she'd rubbed it with her finger after touching the spring. The only person in the world besides him who could interact with the system. And there she was, sitting at his table in a backwater tavern, drinking chicken broth. Martha came in from the kitchen. She looked at Cal. She looked at Lily. Her daughter was sitting up straight. She wasn't coughing. She was examining the mousetrap. Her eyes were alive. Her cheeks had turned slightly pink. Martha leaned against the doorframe and stood there for a minute, silently. Then she quietly went back to the kitchen. The panel displayed Martha Finch's favorability, 34. Transition, 47. Sheltercraft, level 5. After lunch, he went into the woods. Not for herbs, for Soyeon. 5 days ago, a merchant from a neighboring village had told Martha that a girl had been spotted in the woods south of Creston. Young, skinny, in rags. She was picking berries, hiding. The merchant said she was probably a runaway, maybe a thief, maybe worse. Cal remembered. In the woods south of Creston. He walked for an hour and a half, found her in a clearing by a stream. She was sitting under a tree, thin, dirty, wearing a torn robe that had once been white with a silver trim, the Magic Academy uniform. Her hair was black and tangled. She wore glasses on her nose. One lens was cracked. She was eating berries from a handful. Her hands were shaking. When he stepped into the clearing, she jumped up, ran away, hid behind a tree. The panel displayed So-Yun Han, 16 years old, level 9, favorability 3. Hidden flag, expelled from the academy for heresy. Charge, she claimed that the balance tablet contained errors. Status, heretic. Wanted by the Church of Balance. Hidden class, direct descendant of the author of the balance tablet. The key to the Observer's archive runs in her blood. He read it 3 times. Descendant of the author of the balance tablet. Key to the archive. The girl eating berries in the forest and hiding behind a tree carries within her access to the very foundation upon which the entire world stands. And she was expelled for telling the truth. He sat down on the ground, at a distance, without coming any closer. He said he wasn't from the church, not from the academy, not a hunter. He said his name was Cal, that he was from Meadowbrook, that he had been exiled from the Ashworth clan. She remained silent. He said he knew about the tabula, that the tabula contained errors, that he could prove it. She emerged from behind the tree, slowly, like a small animal. She looked at him. She asked how he knew about the errors in the table. He said he could see them, every day, in his system. She sat down across from him, 3 meters away, and began to speak. Softly at first, then louder, then faster. Her stutter disappeared after 5 minutes. She spoke about Tabella's mathematics, about the formulas for experience distribution, about the coefficients that don't match up, about how, if you recalculate the base curve using the raw data, the entire table shifts, that the reward for weak beings is underestimated by a factor of thousands, that the reward for the strong is overestimated by a factor of hundreds, that someone, at some point, altered the initial values, on purpose, so that the strong would remain strong and the weak would remain weak forever. She spoke for 40 minutes, without stopping. Cal listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He nodded, because she was right. Absolutely, completely, down to the last digit. The inversion in his system wasn't a bug. It was the original. The source table. Before the edits. Someone had rewritten the table thousands of years ago and reversed the values. So-Yun had figured this out using pure mathematics, without a system, without the panel, without a bug. Just her brain. And for that, they called her a heretic, and banished her to the forest to die. When she finished, he said 2 words. "You're right." She fell silent. She looked at him. Her eyes behind her cracked glasses grew wide, wet. He said he would prove it, that he had a way, that he needed her help. She began to cry, quietly, silently. Tears simply streamed down her dirty cheeks. The panel flashed. So-Yun Han's favor, 3. Transition, 41. Skill unlocked. Magical engineering, level 8. Threshold 10 passed. So-Yun explained her theory in full. Threshold 20. She pulled a parchment rolled into a tube from beneath her rags. Old, worn, with edges scorched by time. A fragment of the original tablet. Before the church's revisions. The original meanings. Proof that the world is built on lies. He brought her to Meadowbrook by evening. Martha looked at yet another hungry child on the doorstep and silently set out a second bowl. So-Yun ate her soup and cried. Lily walked over to her and placed the wooden bird beside her. She said the bird helps when you're sad. Soyeon looked at the bird, then at Lily. Then she hid her face in her hands. Martha draped a dry blanket over her shoulders and said nothing. Words weren't needed. The panel displayed Orphanage Craft, Level 6. The orphanage was growing. Days 8 through 12 were production days. Cal went to Penny's forge every morning. 2 hours there, 2 hours back. 6 hours of work in between. Penny forged springs. Cal assembled mechanisms. By the 9th day, she had fully mastered the technique of tempering spring steel. She no longer needed explanations. She could feel the metal, the temperature, the moment to strike, the moment to stop. Cal watched her work and realized he was looking at a master. A true one, not an apprentice, not a journeyman. A master who had been missing just one key piece of knowledge. Now she had it. By the 10th day, they'd moved on from mouse traps to larger traps for foxes, wolves, and wild boars. The mechanism was the same, a spring, a lever, a trigger, but the size was different. The material was different. The force required was different. Penny adapted the blueprints herself without his help. She scaled them up, recalculated, reinforced, secured the panel. Forging level 17, 18, 20. Every evening they spent together in the forge raised her skill. Not because he was working with his hands, but because he was working with his hands alongside Penny, for Penny. The system could tell the difference. On the 11th day, he laid out the second blueprint in front of her, a crossbow mechanism. Not a crossbow, a mechanism. A spring-loaded trigger mechanism. Crossbows existed in this world, bulky, slow, with a manually drawn string that required at least level 20 strength. His mechanism allowed the string to be drawn with one hand, by anyone, even a child. Penny looked at the sketch, then at him, then back at the blueprint. She said that if it worked, she'd marry him. Then she blushed and playfully slapped him on the shoulder. She said she was joking, but she took the blueprint. By evening, they had their first prototype. Rough, heavy, with some play in the mechanism, but it worked. Penny drew the bowstring with one hand. She pulled the trigger. The bolt sank 3 fingers deep into the wooden wall of the smithy. She looked at the wall, then at the mechanism, then at Cal. Her eyes were burning so intensely that it scared him a little. While Cal worked with Penny, Soyeon worked at the tavern. Martha had set aside a corner for her behind the kitchen. A table, a candle, paper. Soyeon sat poring over a fragment of the original tabula and transcribing the formulas. She compared them to the current version, which she knew by heart. She searched for points of divergence. On the 9th day, she found the first one. The experience conversion coefficient for first-level creatures. In the original, it was equal to 1. In the current table, 0.4 thousand. Someone had divided the value by 250, on purpose, thousands of years ago. A first-level green swamp frog. The original reward, 1,000 experience points. The current reward, 4. Soyeon showed him the calculations. He looked at them. 1,000. Not a million, 1,000. His system was giving a million. The original gave 1,000. So his system didn't just revert to the original, it also multiplied the value by 1,000. A bug on top of a bug. Inversion plus a multiplier. 2 broken parameters working simultaneously. He knew of such cases. He'd seen them in tests. When 2 bugs overlap, they don't add up, they multiply. Soyeon looked at him, waiting for an explanation. He said his system was special, that it displayed the original values. He didn't lie. He didn't tell the whole truth, but he didn't lie. She nodded. She accepted it. She went back to her calculations. Lily was sitting next to Soyeon, drawing numbers on a piece of paper. Soyeon didn't notice, but Cal did. The numbers Lily was drawing weren't random. They matched the coefficients from the table. The girl could hear them. The resonator was working. He didn't mention it out loud. It was too soon. Lily was still too young, too fragile. And if the church found out that there was a child in a forgotten village who could hear the system, they wouldn't come on a tax collection round. They'd come with fire. By the 12th day, production had settled into a steady rhythm. 47 mousetraps a day, 12 traps for small game, 3 crossbow mechanisms. Penny worked in the blacksmith shop. Cal collected payments at the tavern. Lily sorted the springs by quality. Suyan kept the books. Martha fed everyone and made sure no one collapsed from exhaustion. Villagers came to buy mousetraps, 2 copper coins, then 3, then 4. Because word had spread. The pantries were empty. The rats were gone. The grain stopped disappearing. People came from Creston, from Havenly, from Berkstone, the 3 surrounding villages. The mousetraps sold out the day they were made. Traps for larger animals went for more. 15 copper coins apiece. Hunters paid without haggling because the traps worked and their time was worth more than 15 copper coins. By the 12th day, Cal had 340 gold coins. More than he'd expected. The market turned out to be more eager than he'd thought. Demand exceeded supply 8-fold. He could have raised the prices. He didn't. Reputation is more important. The panel displayed Title, Master of Meadowbrook. Village Favor plus 42. General, Mass. Skill, Business Acumen level 7. But the money was only part of the plan. 340 gold pieces out of 600. Still 260 short. 14 days until the Baron's arrival. He needed to speed things up. He needed another product, a more expensive one, with a higher margin. Crossbow mechanisms. One mechanism cost 2 gold. Cost price 40 silver. A 300% margin. But the buyers, peasants don't buy crossbow mechanisms. He needed a different sales channel. Mercenaries, hunters, small bands, caravans. For that he needed advertising, a demonstration. He thought about it for 2 days. On the 13th day he found a solution. A ravine lay a 20-minute walk from Meadowbrook. A pack of wolves lived in the ravine. 7 of them. The peasants were afraid. They lost livestock every week. 2 cows in the last month, 5 sheep. Red Morton, a level 12 village hunter, had gone after the wolves 3 times. He returned with bite wounds and no results. Cal proposed a plan. Not a hunt, an operation. Traps, set up around the perimeter of the ravine. With bait. With crossbow mechanisms in fixed positions. Automatic. With a tripwire. A wolf touches the wire pulls the trigger. The bolt strikes the target area. Penny set up the mounts in a day. Cal calculated the positions. Red Morton laid out the bait. By the morning of the 14th day, 5 of the 7 wolves were in the traps. 2 had escaped, but 5 were enough. The village rejoiced. Red Morton stood by the ravine and looked at the dead wolves, then at the traps, then at the crossbow mechanisms. Then he turned to Cal and asked how much such a mechanism cost. Cal said 2 gold pieces. Red said he'd take 3. He said he knew some caravan drivers who'd pay 5 for each. He said he knew a garrison officer in Creston who'd pay 10 for a batch of 20. The panel flashed. Skill unlocked. Network sales, level 1. Cal allowed himself a smile. The economy was starting to take off. There were 13 days left until the Baron's arrival. 340 gold pieces plus the crossbow channel. He'd make it in time. That evening, Penny came to the tavern. It was the first time. Usually, Cal went to her. She stood in the doorway, wearing a clean shirt. Her hair was wet. No soot. He didn't recognize her right away. She was carrying something wrapped in cloth. She set it on the table in front of him, unwrapped it. A hammer. Small, light, with an ash wood handle, with a head of hardened steel. A mark was stamped on the head. Her mark. The craftsman's mark. She said one word. Hold it. Then she added, "You fool." Then she quickly leaned in and kissed him on the cheek. Quickly, like a blow, like a spark from an anvil. She pulled back. Her face flushed red to her ears. She turned and walked toward the door. Cal sat there with the hammer in his hands. His cheek was burning. The display showed something, but he didn't look at it. Martha stood behind the counter and smiled as if she knew something he didn't. Lily giggled. So-yeon sat in the corner with her papers, pretending not to see anything, but the tips of her ears were red. The moment lasted 3 seconds. Then it was shattered by a sound. A bell. On the village tower. 1 chime. 2. 3. A signal. Someone was coming. Martha went to the window. She looked out. Her expression changed. Cal approached. A mounted escort was moving along the road toward the village. 8 riders. A banner led the way. A silver hawk on a black field. The Ashworth coat of arms. And at the head of them, a boy, 13 years old, in full armor, with 3 glowing rings on his fingers. 3 elements: fire, ice, lightning. Dorian Ashworth had come to hunt for junk. Production of mousetraps and other traps was running at full capacity and had brought in 340 gold pieces. So-yeon had found evidence that the balance table had been deliberately altered 1,000 years ago. Penny gave Cal a hammer with a personal mark, but the moment was interrupted by the arrival of Dorian Ashworth and his squad. Dorian rode into the village as if it were a conquered city. His horse was white, his armor was polished. A cloak bearing a coat of arms. 3 rings on his fingers shimmered with blue, orange, and white. Fire, ice, lightning. 13 years old, level 22. Behind him were 8 squires, each above level 15. Plate armor, swords, bored expressions. For them, this wasn't a mission, it was a stroll. Dorian his horse in the square in front of the well. He dismounted, he looked around. The village had fallen silent, people had hidden, doors had closed, shutters had slammed shut. Everyone knew what the Ashworth crest on a banner meant in a small village. Nothing good. Dorian smiled. He liked the silence. He liked the fear. He shouted, loudly, across the entire square. He said he was looking for his brother, the Ashworth scum. He said his father had sent him to finish the job. He said that whoever pointed out where the scum was hiding would receive 5 gold pieces. Whoever was hiding the scum would receive 10 lashes. Silence. No one came out. Dorian waited a minute. Then he nodded to the senior guard. The guard approached the nearest house. He knocked. No one answered. He kicked the door in. He dragged the old man out by the arm and threw him to the ground in front of Dorian. The old man was one of those who had been sitting in the tavern on Kel's first evening. A pipe. Wrinkles. Thin arms. Dorian looked down at him. He asked where the trash was. The old man remained silent. Dorian kicked him in the side. Lightly. For a 13-year-old at level 22, it was a tickle. For the old man at level 6, it was 2 broken ribs. The old man groaned. He doubled over. Dorian swung again. Cal stood around the corner of the tavern and watched. The panel displayed Dorian Ashworth, level 22. Favorability -97. Hidden flag. Afraid of his father. Picks on the weak because he himself is weak against the strong. Craves approval. Never received love. -97. Almost at the bottom of the scale. Cal read it and looked away from the panel. Now was not the time for sympathy. Now was the time for a plan. He'd been preparing for this for 3 days, ever since Red Morton told him he'd seen horsemen bearing the Ashworth crest on the northern road. 3 days. Enough. A net had been stretched across the square between the well and old Hamish's blacksmith shop. A fishing net, heavy, weighted with lead balls. The net lay on the ground, covered in dust. Ropes ran to 2 posts at the edges of the square. The posts supported the awning over the stall where turnips were sold. The awning was old, unreliable. It was held up by a promise, and by a single rope that Cal had tied last night. The rope ran from the awning to the net, from the net to the weights, from the weights to the trigger mechanism hidden at the bottom of the well. The trigger mechanism was activated by a stone, a small one lying on the ground at the edge of the square. All he had to do was step on it. Cal came around the corner, slowly, with his shoulders slumped, his hands at his sides. He looked exactly like what he was on the outside. A third-level kid. Skinny. Pale. In dirty clothes. Trash. Dorian saw him and broke into a smile. A wide, joyful smile, like a child who'd spotted his favorite toy. He left the old man behind, turned toward Cal, said, "Finally." That he'd been hiding for a long time, that his father would be pleased. Cal walked across the square toward his brother, slowly. 20 steps. 15. 10. Dorian raised his hand. A fire flared up in his palm. Small, demonstrative. He loved to show off. He said he'd now show what the third element was capable of. Lightning. He said that after that, nothing but a stain would remain of the trash. Cal stopped 3 steps away. He looked Dorian in the eyes. 13 years old. A boy, with eyes that held so much malice it couldn't fit inside his small body and spilled out as fire. Cal took a step to the left. His foot stepped on a stone. The stone shifted. The rope tightened. The trigger mechanism activated. The weights fell. The net shot upward and crashed down onto the square. It engulfed Dorian. It engulfed the 3 guards standing nearby. Lead pellets clattered against their armor. The net wrapped itself around their legs. Dorian fell, face down in the mud. The fire on his palm went out. The 3 rings flickered and went dark. The net was made of the same material as wolf traps, spring steel in the knots, lead in the weights. The more you struggle, the tighter it pulls. Dorian struggled. A lot. Quickly. 10 seconds later, he was lying in the mud, swaddled like a baby. 3 of his companions were floundering nearby. The other 5 stood with their swords at the ready. They looked around. They didn't understand where the threat was coming from. There was no threat. There was a canopy. An old one. One that had finally collapsed. And a net. A farming net. For large game. Which, by an unfortunate twist of fate, happened to be stretched out right here. Cal walked over to Dorian. He bent down. He reached out his hand. He helped him free himself. Dorian stood before him in the mud. Mud on his face, mud on his armor, mud on his coat bearing the coat of arms. Shutters were opening all around the square. Doors, faces, people were watching. The Ashworth heir was wallowing in the mud in full view of 30 peasants. Cal held his hand in apologies. He said he felt terribly embarrassed, that agricultural traps needed to be set more carefully. That, as the village master craftsman, he apologized for the inconvenience. His voice was steady, his expression was serious, not a trace of a smirk. Dorian pulled his hand away. He looked at Cal. There was something new in his eyes. Not anger, the anger had been there before, now there was confusion. He didn't understand what had happened. The canopy had fallen, the net had come down, a coincidence, but that coincidence had the face of his older brother, who stood before him, completely calm. Cal quietly said one sentence to him. He said that next time he should watch more carefully, that this game was already over. Dorian took a step back, then he turned around. He mounted his horse, dirty, silent. 8 companions mounted their horses. The squad rode out of the village, without words, without fire, without lightning. Dorian looked back once. On his face, Cal saw something he hadn't expected. Not rage, fear. The panel flashed. The favor of the village of Meadowbrook, plus 47. Massive. Title unlocked. The Shadow of Meadowbrook. Description. The one they don't see until it's too late. Cal stood in the square. People were gathering around him. They watched. They whispered. The old man Dorian had beaten was sitting by the well, clutching his side. Cal walked over to him. He helped him to his feet. He led him to the tavern. Martha bandaged his ribs. The old man's name was Alden, 63 years old, a former carpenter, level 6. A favor icon hovered above his head, 31. It had just appeared. Alden looked at Cal with teary eyes and said that if the boy needed help with construction, he could still swing an axe. Cal nodded. The panel displayed, Skill unlocked, Carpentry, level 3. The stacking of micro skills continued. By evening, he was sitting at the table, counting. 340 gold from mousetraps, plus 40 from crossbow mechanisms over the last 2 days. 380. He needed 600. 220 left to go. 13 days. The crossbow channel through Red Morton was gaining momentum. Caravan drivers were paying 5 gold pieces per mechanism. The garrison officer in Creston had ordered 20 pieces at 4 gold pieces each. 80 gold pieces for a single order, plus more shipments to come. The math added up. He would make it in time. Dorian Ashworth arrived in the village with a detachment to deal with Cal. Cal lured him into a trap he'd set in advance and publicly humiliated him in front of the villagers while maintaining the appearance of chance. He earned the title the Shadow of Meadowbrook and scared Dorian off. Dorian left in fear and informed his father. On the 16th day, Red Morton brought money from Creston, 80 gold pieces from a garrison officer for 20 crossbow mechanisms, plus 30 from the caravan drivers, plus current sales of mousetraps and other traps. Total, 530 gold pieces. 70 more to go to reach 600. 11 days until the Baron's arrival. The math added up. But Cal didn't let his guard down. He knew from his experience as a game designer that when a player thinks they've won, the system throws up a new problem. The problem came on the 17th day. Red Morton returned from Creston without any money, with a black eye and some news. The Artisans Guild had found out about the crossbow mechanisms. They'd discovered that an unlicensed blacksmith was manufacturing them without the guild's permission and without a hallmark approved by the council. The guild issued a ban. All merchants in Creston and the surrounding villages received a notice. Purchasing goods without the guild's hallmark is prohibited. The fine is 200 gold pieces. The sales channel shut down in a single day. Penny found out that evening. When Cal came into the smithy, she was sitting on the anvil staring at the wall. The hammer lay on the floor. She said it was the end, that the guild always wins, that her father had tried to fight back and died, that she didn't have a mark recognized by the council. More precisely, she did have a mark, a real one, but it was tied to a name she couldn't utter, because if she named it, 3 political marriages in the capital would fall apart, and the people who arranged them would send assassins before she could even say a second word. Cal sat down next to her, on the anvil. He was silent for a moment. Then he asked how much a guild license cost. Penny said that for a new blacksmith it was 300 gold pieces, plus the exam, plus a sponsor from among the active masters. 300 gold pieces she doesn't have. An exam she could pass with her eyes closed. A sponsor she doesn't have because no master in this world would vouch for a female blacksmith. 3 walls, Cal thought. Not about walls, about doors. There's always a door, in any system. He'd been designing systems for 13 years. Every barrier has a workaround. The question is, which one? He activated debug mode. 10 seconds. The world became transparent. Lines, numbers, hitboxes, hidden variables. He looked at Penny's smithy through the eyes of a game designer, and he saw it. An old shield hung on the smithy wall, rusty, with a faded coat of arms. Penny's father's shield. Debugging revealed a hidden flag on the shield, a relic, a connection to the Capital Armorers Guild. Status, dormant. Activation, blood confirmation required. The 10 seconds were up. Debug mode went dark, but he'd seen enough. The shield, blood, the Capital Guild. Not the regional branch that's suffocating Penny. The Capital Guild, the main one. The one that stands above all the regional ones. If he activates the shield's connection with Penny's blood, a direct channel to the Capital Guild will open, bypassing the regional one. And then Penny's brand will become more than just real. It will become the main one. But that means revealing her secret, her father's name. Cal looked at Penny. She was sitting there, staring at the hammer on the floor. He asked if she was ready. She asked what for. He said, for the truth. She looked at him for a long time, then at the shield, then back at him. She said she wasn't ready, but that she had no choice. He said there's always a choice, that he could find another way, that he needed time. She said there was no time. that the guild would seal the forge in 3 days. He said 3 days would be enough. She looked at him as if he were crazy. Then she nodded. He returned to Meadowbrook and thought all night. By dawn, he'd found a solution. Not the shield, not the blood, not Penny's secret, something else. The status of a master craftsman outside the guild, the very one he'd planned to obtain from Baron Holloway upon paying his tax. A status that granted the right to produce and sell goods without a guild license. A royal privilege for masters working in villages where there was no guild branch. An old law, forgotten, but still in effect. Cal knew about it from Cal Ashworth's memories, from the history lessons he'd been given at the estate before they stopped altogether. The Law of King Eldrick III, 200 years ago, paragraph 14. A craftsman recognized by the community of a village where there is no guild branch has the right to trade freely within the province. Recognition requires the village elder's signature, the testimony of 10 householders, and the provincial baron's seal. The village elder's signature, check. The village elder of Meadowbrook will sign today. Testimony from 10 householders, check. 32 households with mousetraps will sign in a minute. The baron's seal. Here's the catch. The baron's seal means we have to wait for Holloway, who'll arrive in 11 days. 3 days until the forge is sealed, 11 days until the baron arrives. An 8-day gap. But the forge is sealed by the regional guild, and the regional guild operates within Baron Holloway's territory. If Cal sends the baron a request for master status before the seal is placed, then by law, the guild is obligated to suspend the procedure until the baron makes a decision. Bureaucracy, his favorite tool. That morning he wrote a petition, in neat handwriting, on fine paper he'd bought from a merchant for 3 copper coins. He attached the village headman's signature. Testimonials from 12 householders. A description of the products. A calculation of the economic benefit to the village. A calculation of tax revenue for the baron's treasury. The last point was key. He wasn't asking for mercy. He was offering money. Baron Holloway was greedy. Greed is predictable. Predictability is manageable. Red Morton sent the petition by pigeon post through Creston. The reply arrived 2 days later. The baron did not refuse. He did not agree. He sent a single word. I will consider it. That was enough. Cal sent a copy of the reply to the regional guild with a note stating that the master's status was under review by the provincial baron and that, pending the baron's decision, any action by the guild regarding the forge was suspended in accordance with paragraph 14 of the Law of Eldrick III. The guild received it. They checked it. The law was genuine. The paragraph was genuine. The baron's reply was genuine. The sealing was suspended. Penny found out that evening. She was standing in the doorway of the forge, reading a copy of the document. Then she looked up at Cal, then back at the document. She asked where he'd learned to lie like that. He said he hadn't. He said every word was true. Every document was genuine. Every law is in effect. She said that was worse than a lie. That's bureaucracy. Then she smiled, for the first time in 3 days. The panel displayed Penny Callahan's favorability, 22. Transition, 36. On the 20th day, everything changed. Not slowly, not gradually, all at once. In the morning, Cal woke up to the panel beeping. It wasn't flashing, it was beeping. A low, monotonous sound, like an alarm in a server room. He opened his eyes. Autolog, a new report, sent to high-level observers. Content. Anomalous subject KA-0017 is exhibiting economic activity incompatible with the declared level. Total income over 20 days, 530 gold. Average income for a level 3 subject over the same period, 0.3 gold. Deviation, 1,767%. Recommendation? Immediate investigation. He closed the report. He looked up at the ceiling. A deviation of 1,767%. The system had sent the report on its own. The observers knew. They didn't just know about the frog. Now they knew about the money, about the mousetraps, about the crossbows, about the village. He sat down on a bench. He thought. The autolog sent a report with every action that disrupted the balance by more than 3 sigmas, 3 standard deviations. He knew what that meant. Any metric that falls outside the normal distribution by 3 sigmas is considered an anomaly. 530 gold for the 3rd level isn't 3 sigmas, it's 23. He was surprised the report hadn't been sent earlier, but that meant something else. The observers were receiving reports, reading them, responding, and if the system log he'd seen on his first day was to be believed, they'd already been alerted once because of him. Now they'd be alerted again. Last time it was about monitoring. This time the recommendation was different. An immediate investigation. The observers didn't conduct the investigation themselves. They had a tool for that. The Church of Balance. The Anomalies Division. The Inquisitor. He got up, got dressed, went out into the hall. Martha was behind the counter. Lily was sitting at the table, drawing numbers. So-Yun was sleeping in the corner with her face on a stack of papers. A typical morning. He walked over to Martha. He said they needed to talk. Seriously. Martha looked at his face and wiped her hands on her apron. That was her gesture when she realized the jokes were over. He told her about the church. Not about the system, not about the panel, not about level 91, about the church. He said his growth had attracted attention, that a village which had earned 530 gold pieces in 20 days was an anomaly, that the Church of Balance monitors anomalies, that they would send someone. Martha listened. Her expression didn't change. When he finished, she was silent for 10 seconds. Then she said one sentence. She said she knew what the Church of Balance was better than he thought. The panel flashed. Favor, Martha Finch, 47. Transition, 50. The 50 threshold crossed. Connection reward, unique. Martha looked at him, then at Lily. Then she went into the back room. She returned a minute later. In her hands was a bundle. Long, heavy. Wrapped in oiled cloth, she unwrapped it on the counter. A leather belt with pockets, knives, bandages, vials, needles, thread, surgical needles, clamps, instruments that Cal had never seen neither in this body's memories nor in his past life. An army medical kit, a field surgeon's kit, from the Royal Army. There was a patch on the belt, faded but legible. 3rd Field Legion, Medical Company, Lieutenant M. Finch, level 51. Martha, Lieutenant, level 51. A widow who cooks soup in a backwater tavern, level 51. She'd been in hiding for 8 years. The 3rd Field Legion had been disbanded after the 9th Rift. The charge, violation of the balance. Commanders were executed, soldiers were stripped of their ranks, medics were declared accomplices. Martha fled. She changed her name. She married the tavern owner. She gave birth to Lily. Her husband died. She stayed behind. She cooked soup. She hid her kit under the floorboards. For 8 years. And now she stood before Cal, fastening the belt around her waist. Her hands didn't tremble. Her back was straight. Her eyes were different. Not the weary eyes of a tavern owner. The eyes of a person who had seen death and learned to look it in the eye. She said that if the church came for this boy, the church would have to get past her first. Then she added that she had a condition. Cal asked what it was. She said that Lily must not know. Ever. Not about her past, not about her level, not about the Legion. To Lily, Mom is the tavern owner who makes soup, that's all. He nodded. The panel displayed, communication skill, sheltercraft, level 10. New ability. Martha Finch is now considered part of Cal's squad. Her medical skills are available for shared use. Field surgery, combat stabilization, poisons and antidotes. Level 51, hidden beneath her apron. He looked at Martha, at her tool belt, at her patch. He thought that in any game, the most dangerous NPC is the one pretending to be a soup vendor. That afternoon, he went to see Penny. He told her same story, without any system details, Just the facts. Attention has been drawn to it. The church might send an inspection. Penny listened. She wasn't scared. She said the church could go to hell. Then she asked what needed to be done. He said they needed to speed up production, earn the remaining 70 gold pieces before the Baron arrives. Obtain the status. The status of a master craftsman outside the guild is legal protection. Not from the church, there's no legal protection against it, but from the Ashworth clan, the guild, and the Baron. Each layer of protection is another wall between him and those who want to destroy him. Penny nodded. She picked up her hammer. She went to the forge. Over the next 4 days, they produced 80 crossbow mechanisms. Red Morton found a new sales channel. Not through Creston, through Birkstone. A different Baron, a different territory. The guild's ban didn't apply there. 40 mechanisms sold for 3 gold each. 120 total. 650 gold. More than they needed. 50 to spare. A reserve. Cal looked at the figure and let out a sigh of relief. The first task was complete. He had the money. Now he needed the Baron. He needed the seal. He needed status. Day 27. Morning. Fog. The road from Creston was dusty. Baron Cedric Holloway was riding in a carriage, a black one, with a coat of arms, a golden key on a blue background. 8 horsemen led the way. Behind them were 4 tax collection wagons. Meadowbrook was the 4th village on the route. The first 3 had paid. Not in full. With delays. With pleas. With tears. The Baron was used to it. Tears were part of the procedure. Cal stood in the square, alone. The village behind him. People stood by their houses, silently, waiting. Everyone knew that today would decide their fate. Life or ashes. Freedom or mines for the children and bondage for the women. Martha stood by the tavern door, Lily in her arms, a belt with tools tucked under her apron. Penny stood by old Hamish's smithy at the edge of the square, a hammer in her hand. So-Yeon was at the window on the 2nd floor of the tavern. Papers lay before her. The carriage came to a stop. The door opened. Baron Cedric Holloway stepped out. He was large and broad-shouldered. His face was red, his eyes small. Level 47. Fur on his shoulders. Rings on every finger. He looked around and saw Cal, a young boy, standing alone in the square, thin and pale, with a hammer on his belt. The Baron frowned and asked where the village headman was. Cal said the village headman was sick, that he was representing the village as a master craftsman. The Baron snorted. He said he didn't talk to children. He said the village owed him a debt, 600 gold pieces. He said that if the money wasn't on the table within an hour, he'd start with the roofs. Cal pulled a bag from his belt. Leather. Heavy. He set it on the table that had been brought out to the square for this occasion. He untied it. Gold. Coins. 620 of them. Each one glistened in the morning sun. The Baron fell silent. The people behind Cal fell silent. The horsemen fell silent. The silence was so thick you could hear the fog settling on the grass. Cal said there were 620 here. He said the Baron could keep for himself, for travel expenses. He said this in an even voice. No smirk, no defiance. Like a man who pays a bill and doesn't consider it a feat. The Baron looked at the gold, then at Cal, then back at the gold. His face went through 3 stages: surprise, suspicion, anger. 620 gold pieces from a village that a year ago could barely scrape together 50 from where the outcast Ashworth scum lived, the very scum to whom his father had personally written a letter ordering that they be given no loans, no medical care, and no burial. The Baron walked over to the table. He picked up a coin. He tested it with his teeth. Genuine. He picked up a second one. Genuine. Cal waited, silently. The Baron counted them, every single coin. 20 minutes. 620. Not a single counterfeit. Then he turned to Cal and asked where they came from. Cal placed a parchment on the table next to the gold, a petition for the status of master craftsman outside the guild, with signatures, with certificates, with calculations. He said that the village of Meadowbrook produced handicrafts, mousetraps, traps, crossbow mechanisms, that the products were sold in 3 provinces, that the tax had been paid in full, and then some, that, as a master craftsman, he was asking the Baron to approve his status in accordance with paragraph 14 of the law of Eldrick III. The Baron read the petition. Slowly. His lips moved. He wasn't stupid. Greedy, but not stupid. He saw that a boy stood before him. He saw that the boy was paying 600 gold pieces that shouldn't exist. He saw that behind the boy stood a village watching not with fear, but with anticipation. The Baron thought for 4 minutes. Cal kept count. Greed versus suspicion, money versus control. 620 gold pieces in his pocket versus an unknown boy who might become a problem. Greed won out, just as he'd expected. The Baron took out his seal. He pressed it against the parchment. Red wax, a golden key. Status confirmed. Cal Ashworth, master craftsman outside the guild. The village of Meadowbrook, Holloway Province. Legal protection from the Ashworth clan. Active. Cal took the parchment, rolled it up, tucked it into his belt, bowed to the Baron, exactly as much as etiquette required, not a centimeter more. The Baron got into his carriage. The wagons carrying the gold set off. Cal stood in the square and watched the dust settle behind the wheels. The village remained silent for another 10 seconds. Then it erupted. Shouts, laughter, someone was crying. Old man Alden sat down on the ground and covered his face with his hands. Marta pressed Lily to her chest so tightly that the girl squealed. The panel displayed. Status. Master craftsman outside the guild. Legal protection from the Ashworth clan. Active. Favor with the village of Meadowbrook. Plus 78. Overall. Mass. Title upgraded. Shadow of Meadowbrook. Rank 2. Description. The one chosen by the village itself. But the Baron was no fool. The carriage hadn't yet disappeared around the bend when the Baron opened the window and said 3 words to his accompanying mage. Send a pigeon to the church. Have them check out this boy. The mage nodded. He took a white pigeon out of its cage. He tied a capsule containing a note to its leg. The pigeon took flight. A white dot against the gray sky. Cal stood in the square and didn't see the pigeon, but he sensed it. Somewhere at the edge of the panel, a line was flashing. Autolog. New report. External request to investigate subject KA-0017. Source. Church of Balance, Holloway Province. Request status. Accepted. Assigned agent. Obadiah Crow. Rank. Senior Inquisitor. Level. 104. Cal closed the panel. He looked up at the sky. The dove had long since vanished. But the message had already been sent. The timer started. A new one. He didn't know how many days he had left, but he knew there weren't many. That evening the village celebrated. For the first time in years. Martha rolled out a keg of beer she'd been saving for a special occasion. That special occasion had arrived. People drank, ate, laughed. Red Morton played the harmonica. Badly, but loudly. Alden danced, slowly, holding his side, but he danced. Lily sat on So-Yun's lap and was weaving her a wreath of daisies. So-Yun sat motionless, afraid to move for fear of disrupting the process. Penny came from Creston, in a clean shirt, again. Her hair was pulled back, again. She sat down next to Cal on the tavern porch, silently. He was silent too. They sat and watched the village celebrating, the people who, 3 weeks ago, had been waiting for death, and now they were dancing. Penny said he was strange. She said she didn't understand him. She said he could have left. He could have sold mousetraps in the city. He could have earned 10 times as much. He could have bought a house. He could have lived. But instead, he stayed in a forgotten village and saved 32 houses that owed him nothing. Cal was silent. Then he said, they owed him. Not money, not a favor. They owed him, because without them, his system wouldn't work. He couldn't explain any further. Not now. But it was true. Every gold coin, every mousetrap, every mechanism worked only because it had been made for someone. For Martha, for Lily, for Penny, for Alden, for the village. The system made a distinction. A mousetrap is worth 4 copper coins. A mousetrap for Martha, whose daughter is dying, is worth 1,000,000 experience points. The difference wasn't in the object. The difference was in the person for whom the object was made. Penny listened. She didn't understand, but she felt it. She rested her head on his shoulder. For 3 seconds. Then she straightened up. She said he was a fool anyway. She stood up and went to the tavern. Cal sat on the porch and looked at the stars. The panel flickered quietly. Penny Callahan's favor, 36. Transition, 43. Somewhere far down the road, a white carriage was traveling. No coat of arms, no noise, with a silver symbol of scales on the door. Inside sat a man in a white cassock, thin, old, with eyes that had seen 1,000 anomalies and erased every one. A glass jar stood on his lap. Inside the jar lay a dead green frog. It glowed in the dark. The 28th day, evening. The tavern was buzzing. People had been drinking for the 2nd day in a row. Red Morton was playing the harmonica again. Alden was telling the story of how he once saw a bone dragon and ran away. Everyone had heard the story 40 times, but they listened anyway. Lily was sleeping upstairs. So-yeon was sitting at a corner table copying down formulas. Martha was standing behind the bar pouring beer. Cal was sitting by the wall eating stew, hot, with meat. Martha had started serving him a double portion starting on the 10th day. Without asking. She just put it down. He didn't argue. His body was still thin. Level 91 changed him on the inside, but not on the outside. His muscles were growing slowly. His channels remained thin. To anyone looking from the outside, he looked like he was at his usual 3 levels. The tavern door opened. No one paid any attention. Doors had been opening all evening. People came and went. But this entrance was different. Silence came before the man did. Red Morton stopped playing. Alden fell silent mid-sentence. The 3 men by the wall set down their mugs. Martha looked up. Cal felt the air in the tavern grow heavier. Not colder, heavier. As if someone had increased gravity by 0.5%. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, thin, in a floor-length white robe. Around his neck, a silver chain with the symbol of scales. His face was narrow. His wrinkles were deep. His eyes were gray. Calm, like those of a man who had long since ceased to be surprised and had long since ceased to be afraid. The panel reacted instantly. Obadiah Crow, Senior Inquisitor of the Church of Balance, Anomalies Division, Level 104, Age 61. Favorability, 0. Hidden Flag, a sincere fanatic. 30 years of service, 217 anomalies eliminated, not a single mistake on his record. Believes that without the tablet, the world will collapse. Partially correct. 104. Cal read the number and felt something tighten inside him. Not fear, he wasn't afraid. Level 91 isn't afraid of level 104. But level 91, hidden within the body of a level 3 under the visibility rule in the presence of an Inquisitor witness, reverts to level 3. And then the difference between them isn't 13 levels, it's 101. Crow won't attack. Not here, not now. Inquisitors don't kill without evidence. They gather evidence. They verify it. They document it. Then they kill. It's procedure. Crow walked through the hall. People parted. Not out of fear, out of awe. Level 104 weighed down on the space around him. Physically. In this world, anyone above the 100th level is required to wear a restraint ring because, without it, their presence disrupts the weather. Crow wore one, a thin silver ring on his index finger. But even with the restraint, his presence was palpable. Pressure. Heaviness. Like standing next to a running turbine. Crow sat down at Cal's table, across from him, silently. He placed his hands on the table. Then he pulled an object from under his robe. Small. Glass. He set it on the table between them. A jar. Inside the jar was a frog. Green. Dead. A marsh frog. The very same one. From the first day. 28 days ago, Cal had hit it with a stick and gained 1,000,000 experience points. And now it lay in a glass jar on the table in front of him, preserved by residual mana. Glowing. Dimly. Green. Like a little lantern. Cal looked at the frog. The frog wasn't looking at anyone. It was dead. Crow smiled. His first smile in 10 years. He said he'd found it 27 days ago, on a rock by a stream in the woods. He said it glowed in the dark. He said that in 30 years of work, he'd seen 217 anomalies, and not one of them had left behind a glowing corpse. He said this was new. Interesting. Then he leaned forward. His voice grew quieter. He said that Cal had until dawn to explain how a first-level frog started glowing, why a third-level outcast's village earned 600 gold pieces a month, and where a boy who can't absorb mana got the skills he's trying to hide, but which leave traces in the fabric of reality. Crow spoke his last word and fell silent. He looked at Cal. Gray eyes. Calm. Patient. The eyes of a man in no hurry because he's always faster. Cal sat motionless, his hands on the table. The frog glowed between them. Martha stood behind the counter. Out of the corner of his eye, Cal saw her hand slip beneath her apron, toward her belt, toward her tools, to the knives. Level 51 versus 104. She would die in 4 seconds. He couldn't let that happen. So-Yeon froze in the corner, hunched over her papers, her eyes wide open. Her hands clenched the pen so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She knew who the Inquisitors were. She had been running from them, and now one was sitting just meters away. The people in the tavern began to leave, quietly, one by one. Within a minute, the room was empty. Left were Cal, Crow, Martha, So-Yeon, and Red Morton, who was too drunk to stand up. Cal thought, quickly, just as he used to think 13 years ago at his desk when a tester would report a critical bug an hour before release. Options. First, lie. Say he doesn't know, that the frog wasn't his, that he'd earned the money through trading. That wouldn't work. Crow was a professional. 30 years, 217 anomalies. He'd sense the lie. Option 2. Run. At level 91, he could do it. Shadow Step, Iron Skin, Regeneration. But then there's the village. Martha, Lily, Penny, So-Yeon. Everyone's in danger. The Inquisitor won't leave until he's finished. Option 3. Fight. Level 91 against 104. With the visibility rule. With a limiter that will be removed if Cal displays power above level 3. With the church, which will send reinforcements. Madness. Level 4. The truth. Not all of it, just a part. Enough to pique interest, not enough to destroy. He recognized Crow by his hidden banner. A sincere fanatic. Believes in the code. Believes the world will collapse without it. Partly right, partly. That meant Crow wasn't just a blind follower. He was a thinking fanatic, the most dangerous kind. But also the most vulnerable, because a thinking fanatic can be persuaded otherwise, not by force, not by trickery, but by evidence. Cal looked at the frog, then at Crow, then at the panel. In the corner of the panel, a line was slowly appearing, letter by letter. Observer Iona requests a connection. Accept. He didn't accept, not now. Right now, sitting between him and death was an old man in a white cassock with silver scales around his neck, and Cal had until dawn. He smiled slowly. For the first time in 17 years in this body, a genuine smile. Not out of politeness, not out of tact, for genuinely. He said he'd show Crow what the system looked like from the inside. He said he had one condition. Crow raised an eyebrow. Cal said the Inquisitor would listen until the end. Crow was silent for 3 seconds. Then he nodded. A line lit up on the panel. Debug mode activated. Witness 1. Plausibility belt, removed voluntarily. Reward, ? Cal activated debug mode. 10 seconds. The world around them became transparent. Lines, numbers, hitboxes, triggers, and a panel unfolded in the air before Crow. Visible, not just to Cal, to both of them. A table, the real one, the original, before the edits. Crow watched. His face remained unchanged for the first 2 seconds. On the third, he turned pale. On the fifth, his hands on the table clenched into fists. On the seventh, he closed his eyes. On the 10th, debug mode went dark. The panel vanished. The world returned to normal. Crow sat with his eyes closed. He was silent. Then he opened his eyes. He looked at Cal. For the first time in 30 years, there was something resembling doubt in the eyes of the senior inquisitor of the Church of Balance. Crow remained silent for 4 minutes. Cal counted, every second. 240 seconds of silence in which a fate was being decided. Not just his, Martha's, Lily's, Penny's, So-Yan, the village's, perhaps the world. The Inquisitor sat with his eyes closed, his hands on the table, his knuckles white. The silver scales on his chest rose and fell with his breath. He saw the table, the original one. 10 seconds. That was enough. For 30 years he had been hunting anomalies because he believed that the table was absolute, that the numbers didn't lie, that the system was created by the gods and was perfect. And in 10 seconds, a third-level boy showed him that the numbers had been lying for 1,000 years, that the original values were different, that someone had rewritten the table on purpose, so that the weak would remain weak, so that the strong would remain strong, so that the world would be built on inequality that looks like a law of nature. Crow opened his eyes. He looked at Cal, then at the frog in the jar, then back at Cal. He said one word. Prove it. Don't just show it. Prove it. There's a huge difference. A magician can show it. Only someone with facts can prove it. Cal turned to So-Yan. She was sitting in the corner, pale, a pen in her hands, her eyes fixed on the Inquisitor. He said one word to her. Show it. So-Yan stood up, slowly. Her legs wouldn't obey her. She walked over to the table. She placed a stack of papers in front of Crow. Calculations, formulas, comparisons. 3 weeks of work. The original coefficients from a fragment of the original table and the current values. Points of divergence. Mathematical proof that the table had been altered. Not an error. Not evolution. A deliberate modification. Crow picked up the first sheet. He read it. Slowly. He turned the page. Read the next one. So-Yan stood nearby, trembling. Cal saw the panel. Obadiah Crow's favor. 0, 0, 0. She didn't move. The Inquisitor read for 20 minutes, 12 sheets. Then he placed the stack on the table. He aligned the edges neatly. He looked at So-Yan. He asked where she had gotten the fragment of the original tabella. So-Yan said she had found it in the Academy's archives, in a locked vault, where students are forbidden to enter. Crow nodded. He asked if she knew that theft from the Academy's archives was punishable by death. So-Yan said she knew. Her voice didn't tremble. For the first time that night. Crow looked at her for 5 seconds. Then he turned to Cal. He said that the evidence was convincing, but insufficient. He said that for complete proof, they needed access to the full original tabella, not a fragment, the entire document, which is kept in one place, the Observer's Archive, access to which was impossible. Cal said it was possible. Crow raised an eyebrow. Cal looked at So-Yan. So-Yan looked at Cal. She didn't know. He hadn't told her. About the key in her blood. About the fact that she was a descendant of the table's author. About the fact that hidden within her was access to the archive that could turn the world upside down. Now was not the time. He turned to Crow. He said he needed time, 3 months, to gather evidence, to gain access, to prove it, not just to him, but to everyone. Crow remained silent. Then he said that Cal didn't have 3 months, that the report had already been sent, that the church would send a second inquisitor in 10 days and a third in 20, that the procedure had been set in motion, that only one thing could stop it, the results of the investigation signed by him personally. He was the senior inquisitor. His word carried weight. If he wrote that there was no anomaly, then the church will back down. For a while. Cal asked if he would write it.
Crow was silent for 30 seconds. The panel flashed. Obadiah Crow's favor. 0. Transition. 1. 1. Out of 217 inspections, Crow had never once written that there was no anomaly. Not once in 30 years. Every inspection had ended with its elimination. Every single one. And now the number had shifted by 1. From 0 to 1. Crow stood up. He picked up the jar with the frog. He looked at Cal. He said he'd write it up, that the anomaly wasn't confirmed, that further investigation was needed, that the status was open. He said this wasn't a solution, it was a delay. He said that if Cal didn't have proof in 3 months, he'd be back, and then the conversation would be different. Then he walked toward the door. He stopped. He turned around. He looked at So-Yun. He said her calculations were beautiful, that in his entire life he'd never seen cleaner math. Then he said that if she was wrong, he would personally execute her. And if she was right, he would personally apologize. He walked out. The door closed. Silence. Martha exhaled. Her hand slowly withdrew from under her apron, away from the knives. So-Yun sat down on a chair and began to cry. Quietly, silently. Red Morton was snoring in the corner. He'd slept through the whole thing. Cal sat at the table, staring at the spot where the jar had stood. A wet ring from the glass remained on the table. The panel flickered quietly in the corner of his vision. Observer Iona requesting communication. Accept. He pressed yes. Iona's voice wasn't like the system's voice. The system spoke matter-of-factly, mechanically, like an answering machine. Iona spoke like a human. Tired, frightened, determined. She spoke directly into his mind, not through the panel, through something deeper, as if her words were born in that place where thoughts have not yet become words. She said he had little time, that the other 2 observers already knew about him, that they wouldn't wait 3 months. That Crow had written a report, but Crow's report was just paper, and the observers don't read paper. They read the fabric of reality. And in the fabric of reality, Cal Ashworth is a hole the size of a continent. He asked why she had done this. Why did she plant his soul in this body? Why did she give him a broken system? Why the frog? Why him? Iona was silent for 5 seconds. Then she told the truth. The 11th rift, 18 months. A beast that doesn't fit into the table. She had calculated all the options, all possible heroes, all possible armies, all possible alliances. Not a single one survives. The world perishes in every scenario. Except one, the one in which someone breaks the rules. Doesn't violate them, breaks them, rewrites them. Because the beast from the 11th rift doesn't obey the table. It exists outside the table. And only someone who also exists outside the table can defeat it. A game designer. A person who knows how systems work, how they're broken, how to fix them. She found him at the moment of his death on the Hangang Bridge. She extracted his soul, placed it into Cal Ashworth's body, embedded the broken system as a tool. The inversion of the table isn't a bug. It's her signature. The original values multiplied by 1,000. Her insurance to ensure he survived the first few days. She staked everything on him, her very existence, her standing among the observers, her eternity. If he fails, she'll be erased. Cal listened, in silence. Then he asked one thing. Why him specifically? Out of billions of people, out of thousands of game designers. Iona said it wasn't because of his knowledge, it was because of habit. He'd spent his whole life fixing other people's broken games. making them fairer. Not because he was paid to, because he couldn't do otherwise. 40-hour shifts, patches at 3 in the morning, formulas that no one but him would notice. He made the world a fairer place, one line of code at a time. She wasn't looking for a hero. She was looking for a repairman. Cal sat on a bench in an empty tavern. Martha was clearing the dishes. Suyan was sleeping in the corner. Dawn was breaking outside the window. Iona's voice was fading. The last thing she said. In 3 months, the other 2 observers will come in person. They won't send an inquisitor. They won't send an army. They'll come themselves. 3 gods in 1 world. Reality won't hold up. Rifts will begin. Mini-rifts, monsters, chaos. And if by that point Cal hasn't found a way to access the Observer's archive and rewrite the balance table, the world will begin to crumble long before the 11th rift. The connection was lost. The panel went dark for a second. Then it came back on. A new line. The mission. The main task. Rewrite the balance table. Deadline. 3 months until the observers arrive. 18 months until the 11th rift. Reward. The world's survival. Or the erasure of everything. In the morning, he gathered everyone. Martha, Penny, Soyeon. At the tavern. The door was locked. The shutters were closed. Lily was upstairs with Alden, who was telling her a story about a carpenter and a magic hammer. Cal spoke for 20 minutes. Not everything. Not about Ion. Not about rebirth. Not about the panel. But enough. He said the balance table was a lie. That the original values were different. That someone 1,000 years ago rewrote the rules of the world so that the strong would remain strong. That the 11th rift would destroy the world if nothing changed. That he had a plan. Crazy, impossible, but the only one. To enter the Observer's archive, to retrieve the complete original balance table, to rewrite the current one, to restore the balance, the real one. Martha listened in silence. Then she asked what was needed. Cal said he needed a base, Meadowbrook, a workshop, not just a forge, a complex, production, research, training. Soyeon said that a key was needed to access the archives. Cal said he had the key. He didn't say which one, not yet. Penny said she didn't care about archives or gods. She said that if Cal needed a hammer, she'd be his hammer. Then she blushed and added that she meant a blacksmith's hammer. Soyeon raised her hand, quiet, like in class. She said that if the record book could be rewritten, her theory would be confirmed, that everything she'd been expelled from the academy for would turn out to be true, that she was ready. Martha said she was 51 and that she was too old for heroic deeds. Then she said that heroic deeds were for the young, and she would make broth and stitch up wounds. Cal looked at the 3 women sitting before him in a small tavern at the edge of the world. The landlady, the blacksmith, the mathematician, and somewhere up above, a 6-year-old girl who hears the system's numbers. A team. His team. The panel displayed the information. Squad formed. Name, Meadowbrook Workshop. Members, 4. Skills, assigned. Squad bonus, shelter crafting, level 12, plus 5% to all coordinated actions. He smiled. The workshop was up and running. Iona revealed the truth to Cal about his transfer and that the 11th rift would destroy the world if the tablet wasn't rewritten. 2 other observers would arrive in person in 3 months, which would cause reality to fracture. Cal gathered Martha, Penny, and Soyeon and officially formed the Meadowbrook Workshop Squad. 2 months. 60 days that changed Meadowbrook. Cal worked 18 hours a day. He slept 4. He ate on the go. Martha would curse and set her plate right on the blueprints. He ate without looking and kept counting. The workshop was growing. Penny remodeled the blacksmith shop. She expanded it. She installed a 2nd forge, then a 3rd. She hired 2 apprentices from Creston, guys the guild had rejected because they were too poor to pay the initiation fee. Now they were forging springs 12 hours a day and, for the first time in their lives, earning a salary. Soyeon turned the 2nd floor of the tavern into a laboratory.
Papers, formulas, mana charts. She had deciphered 70% of the fragment of the original tabella. She found patterns. She found key points of divergence. She built a model. The model showed that rewriting the tabella required direct access to the observer's archive, and that the key to the archive was not an object. It was blood. The blood of the author's descendant. So, Young didn't know it was her blood. Cal knew. He was waiting for the moment. On the 35th day, the moment came. He was sitting with So Young on the roof of the tavern. Night, stars. She was telling him about her family, about her mother who had died when she was 10, about her father whom she had never known, about her grandmother who had raised her and who, before she died, had uttered a strange phrase, that numbers lived in their blood. So Young thought her grandmother was rambling. Cal knew she wasn't. He told her, not everything, but enough. He said that her ancestor had written the balance table, that the key to the archive was in her blood, that she wasn't a heretic. She is the heir. So Young was silent for a long time. Then she asked if he was absolutely sure. He said he was. She asked what that meant for her. He said it meant she was the only one who could open the door that had been closed for 1,000 years. She began to cry, again, the third time in his presence. But this time the tears were different, not from fear, not from gratitude, from understanding. Her whole life, exile, hunger, the forest, berries, all of it had been the path leading to this moment. She hadn't been wrong. She'd never been wrong. The record really does contain errors, and she was born to correct them. The panel displayed So-Yeon Han's favor, 41, transition, 53. The 50 threshold has been crossed. The reward of connection, a joint invention, the reverse formula, the ability. Cal can temporarily lift the rule of visibility for 60 seconds, 7-day cooldown. Reverse formula, 60 seconds without concealment, 60 seconds at full power in front of witnesses, once a week. It changed everything. On the 40th day, Abby arrived in Meadowbrook, tall, calm, with a knife under her coat and a cup of tea in her hand. She showed up in the evening, without warning, sat down at a table in the tavern, ordered tea. Martha served it, looked at Cal. Cal looked at the panel. Abigail Winters, 24 years old, level 68, hiding half her power. Mercenary hunter, hidden flag, works for the underground, planning a coup against the Church of Balance. Codename, Greyblade. Sent to scout out a workshop in the wilderness that's the subject of rumors. Favor, 12. 12 right off the bat. She already knew something about him, or about what he does. Abby sipped her tea and looked at Cal. He was looking at her. She said she'd heard about the boy who outplayed Baron Holloway without a single blow. She said it sounded interesting. She said she wanted to take a closer look. Cal said she could watch, but touching would cost her dearly. Abby laughed. The first person in 7 years who had joked with her instead of being scared of her. She stayed the night, then a second night, then a week. On the third day, she saw Lily, the little girl running around the tavern, healthy, laughing, alive, the very same girl who, 3 months ago, was dying of a lung disease and whom the +2 recovery broth had saved. Illegal, not approved by the church, not prescribed by a doctor, just broth cooked by a boy for a specific girl. Abby stared at Lily for 10 minutes. Then she silently walked into the forest. She returned 2 hours later, with the head of the alpha wolf. She tossed it onto the tavern porch. She said 3 words to Cal. "This is your pack now." The panel displayed Abigail Winters' favor, 12. Transition, 39. Threshold 10 passed. Abby told him about her brother, her younger brother, who had died 8 years ago because the clan didn't consider him high enough level to warrant treatment. Level 7. Too low for expensive potions, too low to warrant the healer's attention, high enough to feel pain. He died at 12 from a wound that any 5th-rank healer could have cured, but they didn't, because the numbers didn't add up. Ever since then, Abby had hated numbers, hated levels. She hated the rank system, and she worked for those who wanted to destroy it all. Cal listened. Then he said he wasn't going to destroy it. He was going to fix it. Abby looked at him. She said that fixing things was for cowards. He said that fixing things was for those who understood that without a system, the world would collapse, and with the wrong system, the world would rot, that the right one was needed. She was silent. Then she nodded. She stayed. On the 55th day, a letter arrived, by Royal Mail, with the court seal. An invitation. Cal Ashworth, Master Craftsman, invited to the Crafts Fair in the capital, in 30 days. The fair is held once every 3 years. All the masters of the kingdom, all the guilds, all the clans, and the court, the king, the princesses, the advisors. Cal held the letter and realized it wasn't an invitation, it was a challenge. Someone wanted to see him on an open stage, where there was nowhere to hide, where every step was on display. The panel flickered quietly. Hidden text on the back of the letter, visible only in debug mode. He didn't want to waste a debug session. So Young held the letter up to a candle. The heat made the ink appear. One line. Looking forward to meeting you. I, the letter I, Isolde, the third princess, the secret leader of the underground organization Abby works for. They hadn't met face to face yet, but they were both working toward the same goal, and they were both heading toward him. Cal folded the letter, put it in his pocket. He looked at the team, Martha behind the counter, Penny with a hammer, So-Yun with formulas, Abby with a knife, Lily with a wooden bird. He told them they were heading to the capital. The capital of Aquilion was called Veltor, a city on a hill. White walls, spires, bridges between the towers. 300,000 residents. The average level of a city dweller was 22. The average level of a guard was 35. The average level of an aristocrat on the street was 50. Cal entered the city with an external level of 15, the maximum allowed by the believability belt among such a large number of witnesses. 15. A craftsman from the provinces, a nobody. The crafts fair occupied the central square and 4 adjacent streets. Tents, stalls, smoke from forges, the clang of metal, the smell of leather, wood, and hot oil. Artisans from all over the kingdom, blacksmiths, weavers, alchemists, carpenters, jewelers. Everyone was showcasing their best work. Cal set up his stall in the far corner. Mousetraps, traps, crossbow mechanisms. Penny stood beside him, wearing a blacksmith's apron, with a hammer. So-Yun behind her, with papers. Abby on the roof of the neighboring house, with tea. Martha stayed in Meadowbrook with Lily. The first day passed quietly. People came over. They looked. They fiddled with the mechanisms. They bought mousetraps. They marveled at the springs. Nothing special. On the second day, a young woman approached the counter. 19 years old, dark hair, green eyes, a simple dress but made of expensive fabric. A warm smile, calm hands. She picked up a mousetrap, turned it over in her hands, set it down. She looked at Cal. She asked how the spring mechanism worked. Her voice was soft and curious. Cal explained. She listened. She nodded. She asked questions, intelligent ones, precise ones. Not the questions of a customer, the questions of an engineer, or a politician who wants to understand the economics of a product. The panel displayed Isolde Varenne, third princess of the kingdom, level 34, favorability -10, hidden flag, secret leader of the underground, codename White Rook. Her mother was killed by the Holloway clan, forced to smile at her murderers, hates every second of it, seeking a tool for revenge, not revenge for the sake of blood, revenge for the sake of justice. -10, trusts no one. Cal looked at her and saw a double mask, a smile over ice, ice over fire, fire over emptiness. 4 layers. He'd seen such layers in the characters he'd created, but this was the first time he'd seen them in a living person. Isolde bought 3 mousetraps. She said they were an interesting product. She said she'd like to discuss supplies for the palace storerooms. She suggested they meet that evening at the tea house on West Street. She left. Cal watched her go. Penny stood nearby, watching Cal as he watched the princess walk away. Her face was expressionless, but she was gripping the hammer in her hand a little tighter than necessary. That evening, he went to the tea house. Isolde was sitting at a corner table, alone, without guards, without a mask of a smile. Her face was cold, her eyes were sharp, a different person. She said she knew who he was. Not a master craftsman, not some small-town boy. A man who, in 3 months, had transformed a dead village into an economic hub, who had outmaneuvered the Baron, who had made the senior inquisitor of the Church of Balance doubt himself for the first time in 30 years. She said her people had been watching him for 2 months. She said Abby was working for her. Cal nodded. He knew. The panel showed it. Isolde and Abby, the Grey Blade and the White Rook. One underground network, different ends of the same rope. He said he knew. Isolde raised an eyebrow, the first crack in her icy mask. He said he knew about the underground, about the code names, about the plan for a coup against the church. He said the coup wouldn't work. Isolde clenched her cup. She said he was presumptuous. He said he was a realist. He said the church wasn't the enemy, the church was a tool. A broken tool operating under broken rules. Destroying the tool would leave the world without any rules at all. And a world without rules is chaos. It shouldn't be destroyed. It needs to be fixed. Isolde was silent. She looked at him. He took a sheet of paper out of his pocket. He placed it in front of her. A plan. Not a military one, an economic one. How to ruin the Holloway clan. Without bloodshed, without an army. Through trade routes, through debt obligations, through patents on craft technologies that he controls. The Holloways depend on weapons shipments from the eastern provinces. If 3 trade hubs are cut off simultaneously, their contracts will become worthless within 40 days. The clan that killed her mother, destroyed by paper and numbers, without a single sword. Isolde read the plan for 7 minutes. Then she looked up. There was something new in her eyes. Not ice, not fire. Hunger. The hunger of a man who had spent 6 years searching for a weapon and had finally found it. She said she wanted to know everything. Cal said it would be a long conversation. She said she had time. He said he had a condition. She asked what it was. He said the underground was shifting from a plan for a coup to a plan for reform. Not the destruction of the church, the replacement of the table. A new table, an honest one, based on the original values. A world where level 3 doesn't mean trash. Isolde was silent for 30 seconds. Then she slipped a ring off her finger. Small, silver, engraved. She placed it on the table. She said it was the symbol of the White Rook, that now it belonged to him, that the underground was his. The panel flashed. Isolde Varaine's favor, -10. Transition. 28. Threshold 10 passed. Isolde dropped her mask of a smile in front of him. Threshold 20 passed. She shared the secret of the underground. Skill unlocked. Political network, level 1. Cal took the ring. He put it in his pocket next to the parchment confirming his master status. 2 documents, one from the Baron, one from the princess. A shield and a sword, both made of paper, both stronger than steel. He left the tea house. Abby was standing on the street, with tea. She was smiling. She said she was glad her 2 bosses hadn't had to kill each other. Cal asked if she knew that Isolde was the White Rook. Abby said she'd guessed as much. Cal asked why she hadn't said anything. Abby said he hadn't asked. Then she took a sip of tea and added that the princess was beautiful. Cal didn't reply. They walked through the capital at night, spires in the moonlight, torches on the walls. A city that didn't know that in 15 months it might cease to exist. A year had passed, 4 seasons, 365 days. Cal remembered each one by the numbers. Day 70. The Meadowbrook workshop had become the hub for 3 provinces. Penny's spring steel was shipped to 8 cities. Crossbow mechanisms were in service with 12 caravan companies and 3 garrisons. Mousetraps were sold in every village from the coast to the foothills. The village that 3 months ago had been slated for burning over debts now paid its taxes on time and even ahead of schedule. The houses had been repaired. Children were learning to read at the school So-yeon had opened in an old barn. Martha had expanded her tavern, a second story, 10 rooms. Merchants came specifically for it. Martha's broth had become legendary. People said it had healing properties. They weren't lying. Day 100. Through frontmen, Cal bought half of the Ashworth clan's debt obligations. Father Magnus didn't know that his eldest son, whom he had struck from the family register, now held the right to a third of his lands. He didn't use it. He kept it as leverage, as insurance, as a reminder to himself that revenge and justice are different tools for different tasks. Day 120. The Holloway clan lost 3 trade contracts, then 5, then 8. Isolde worked as a surgeon, precisely, quietly, no blood. By the end of the 4th month, the Holloways had lost 40% of their income and didn't understand why. Day 150. Obadiah Crow returned. Just as he'd promised. He sat down at the same table. Cal laid out new evidence in front of him. So-yeon had fully decrypted the fragment. 93 discrepancies between the original and the current tablet. Each one documented, each one proven. Crow read for 3 hours. Then he stood up. He said he still didn't believe it, but he wanted to believe it. That was the most terrifying thing an inquisitor could say. The panel displayed Obadiah Crow's favor. 1. Transition. 19. Day 200. The first mini-rift. Small, the size of a door. It opened in a field south of Meadowbrook. 3 creatures emerged from it. Minor, level 5. Red Morton and Abby destroyed them in a minute. But the rift didn't close. It pulsed, like a wound that won't heal. Cal stared at the rift and knew what it meant. The observers are stirring. Reality is cracking. They're coming. Day 250. Confrontation with his father. Lord Magnus Ashworth arrived in Meadowbrook in person, with a contingent of 30 warriors, with Dorian, with lawyers, demanding repayment of debts and a halt to commercial activities. Cal met him in the square, the very same one where Dorian had been wallowing in the mud. Cal didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He presented the documents, his master's status, the Baron's seal, the court's signature, trade contracts, debt obligations. Every sheet was like a blow, a silent one, precise. On paper, Magnus Ashworth stood before the son he had struck from the book and realized that this son now held his future in his hands. Cal proposed a deal. Not revenge, a deal. The Ashworth clan would support the Tabella reform. In exchange, the debt obligations would be returned. The lands would remain with the clan. Their reputation would be preserved. Magnus looked at his son for a long time. Then he asked why. Why the reform? Why did he need this? Cal said that in 8 months the 11th rift would open, that without the reform the world would not survive, that he needed allies, not enemies, that his father could be one or the other. Magnus thought about it for a day. Then he signed. Not out of love, out of calculation. Cal didn't expect love. Calculation is more reliable. Dorian stood next to his father and said nothing. He looked at Cal. There was no anger in his eyes. There was confusion. A 13-year-old boy who had spent his whole life beating his older brother because his father had ordered it, and now his father was signing this brother's papers. Dorian's world was crumbling. Cal looked at him. The panel displayed Dorian Ashworth's favorability. -97. Transition, -61. A shift. A small one, but heading in the right direction. Day 300. The mini-rifts were becoming more frequent. 3 a week, then 5. The creatures emerging from the rifts were growing stronger. Level 10, 20, 30. Cal organized the defense, crossbow mechanisms in fixed positions, traps along the perimeter. Abby commanded a squad of hunters. Penny forged weapons. So-yeon analyzed the rifts and looked for patterns. She found one. The rifts were opening along lines that converged at a single point. That point was to the north, in the mountains, where, in 5 months, the 11th fault would open. Day 320. Cal made his decision. They couldn't wait. The observers would arrive before the fault opened. They had to go first. They had to enter the archive to rewrite the register. Before the world falls apart. So-yeon was ready. The key in her blood was active. She could feel it, like warmth in her veins, like music in her bones. Lily helped. The resonator picked up the key's frequency and guided So-yeon. A 6-year-old girl who could hear the system's numbers led a 16-year-old Ma to a door that hadn't opened in 1,000 years. Cal assembled a team. Everyone. Martha, Penny, So-yeon, Abby, even Crow, who showed up without his cassock, in regular clothes, without the scales around his neck. He said that if the register had indeed been rewritten, he wanted to see the original, in person. They traveled north for 3 days, toward the mountains, toward the convergence point, toward the place where reality was at its thinnest, where the door to the observer's archive had been waiting for 1,000 years. The door wasn't a door. It was a wall of air, transparent, humming, like a computer screen the size of a house. So-yeon stepped forward. She placed her palm against it. The wall glowed. Gold. The blood in her veins surged. Warmth turned to heat. Heat turned to light. Light turned to sound. Lily squinted and covered her ears. The numbers were screaming. The wall opened. Behind it lay the archive. Endless, white, columns of numbers, rows of formulas. There was no ceiling. There was no floor. Only data. All the mathematics of the world. Every formula. Every coefficient. Every value. The balance sheet in its entirety. And in the center of the archive stood 3 silhouettes. Observers. Archival gods. Those who had watched over the balance of the world for 1,000 years. One of them stepped forward. Yu was stark, faceless, his voice like thunder. He said the boy had gone too far. The second stood in silence. The third, Iona, small, with a face, with eyes, frightened. She looked at Cal. He looked at her. She had staked everything on him, her existence, her eternity. If he lost, she would be erased. Cal activated the reverse formula. 60 seconds without camouflage. The visibility rule lifted. Level 91, full power. The archive hummed. The first observer raised his hand. A wave of power. Level, incalculable. God. Cal didn't fight. He did what he'd done every workday for 13 years. He opened the panel, found the line. Base experience conversion coefficient. Current value, 0.4000. Original value, 1. He placed the cursor, deleted it, typed in 1. The observer paused, looked at the line. The second observer approached, looked too. Cal was changing the values, one by one, restoring the original ones. The ones So-yeon had decoded. The ones Lily had heard. The ones that were correct. The original ones. The honest ones. The first observer said this was a violation, that the balance would collapse, that the world couldn't withstand it. Cal stopped, looked at him, said that the world couldn't withstand it right now, that the 11th rift was a symptom, not the cause, that the beast that doesn't fit into the table exists because the table is distorted, that if the original values were restored, the beast would fit, because it had always been part of the system, a part that had been crossed out, just as it had been crossed out of the family registry, just as So-yeon had been crossed out of the academy, just as Penny had been crossed out of the guild, just as Lily was struck from the treatment list, just as Abby's brother was struck from her life, just as Martha was struck from the army. The world doesn't crumble because of anomalies. The world crumbles because of erasures. Silence. The first observer was silent. The second was silent. Iona was crying. Gods cry without tears, but she was crying. Cal turned to the panel. He continued, line by line, value by value. So-yeon stood nearby and dictated the numbers. Lily sat in Martha's arms and listened to the archive sing. Penny stood with a hammer at the ready, just in case. Abby drank tea from a flask. Crow knelt and looked at the original table, the one he had served for 30 years, the one that didn't exist, the one that had been replaced. Tears streamed down his wrinkled face. He didn't wipe them away. Cal worked for 40 minutes. He replaced 93 values, each one with the original. When the last digit fell into place, the archive shuddered. Not much, like a computer rebooting. A quiet sound, like a bell. Like that very ting he'd heard when he killed the frog. The panel displayed balance sheet, updated, version, original, status, active. Beast of the 11th Rift, status, integrated. Threat, neutralized. Reward, peace. The first observer looked at Cal for a long time. Then he said that the boy had ruined 1,000 years of his work. Cal said he'd fixed it. The observer was silent. Then he nodded, turned around, walked into the depths of the archive. The second followed him. Iona stayed behind. She looked at Cal, smiled, said she hadn't been wrong, said he really was a repairman. Then she said it was time for her to go, that the archive needed a keeper, that this was her place, that she would stay. Cal nodded. Iona turned to So-Yun. She said that the key in her blood now worked both ways, that she could enter the archive whenever she wanted, that the tablet would need maintenance and inspections, patches. So-Yun nodded. Her eyes were dry, her back was straight. The girl who had been eating berries in the forest had just become the guardian of the world's mathematics. They left the archive. The wall closed behind them. Silence. Many fissures across the continent began to close, one by one, like light bulbs going out. Reality stopped crackling. The world exhaled. He stood in Midbrook Square, the very same one, with the well, with the awning they'd never fixed after the grid failure. Morning. Sun. The first day of the new world. A world in which the balance tablet is real, original, honest. He could feel the difference. Not inside himself, all around him. The air felt lighter. The sounds were clearer, as if someone had removed the noise that had been there for 1,000 years, a noise everyone had grown accustomed to and no longer noticed. And now that the noise was gone, the silence was deafening. The panel hung in his peripheral vision. Quiet. Calm. No red lines. No autologs. No reports for observers. For the first time in a year, it was silent. He opened the statistics. Level 91. The same. Skills. 312. The micro skills had been accumulating all this time. Each one added plus 0.1% to something. Together, they provided a bonus that was easier to measure as a percentage of infinity. The rule of visibility. Amended. New wording. A level is displayed as real if the subject voluntarily removes their camouflage. So-Yun and her reverse formula had become part of the new register. Not an exception. The rule. Now anyone could reveal their true level whenever they wanted. Concealment remained a choice, not a curse. He closed the panel. He looked at the village. Meadowbrook had changed. The houses had been renovated. The streets were clean. A new forge stood by the blacksmith's shop. The fourth one. Penny's business was expanding. Her apprentices had become masters. Spring steel was being shipped throughout the kingdom. The Artisans Guild had sent an official invitation, not through collectors with badges, through a courier who bowed. Penny read the invitation and hung it on the smithy wall, next to the brand, next to the blueprint of her first spring. She didn't go. She said she had her own guild, Meadowbrook. That was enough. Martha stood behind the tavern counter, as always, an apron, hands red from work, soup on the stove, broth for the guests. Not medicinal, just ordinary. Lily no longer needed medicinal portions. Her lung disease had receded completely, forever. The girl ran through the village with a wooden bird and bossed around 3 boys from neighboring houses. They listened because she said things that made sense, and because she heard numbers that no one else could hear. The resonator grew along with her. Cal wasn't exactly complaining. She's 7. She has her whole life ahead of her. Let her run. Let her boss the boys around. Let her hear the music of the world. The time for seriousness will come. Not now. So-yeon was leaving for the capital. The Royal Academy of Magic had sent an official apology, signed by the rector, certified by the court, the king's seal. They were inviting her back, not as a student, but as a professor. The Department of Systems Mathematics, a new one, created especially for her. She stood in the doorway of the tavern, her bag in her hands, unable to leave. Lily held her by the sleeve and said that if So-yeon left, who would draw numbers with her in the evenings? So-yeon crouched down. She hugged the girl. She said she'd come to visit every month. Lily said every 2 weeks. So-yeon said, okay. Martha stood in the doorway and smiled. Cal stood by the well and watched. So-yeon walked over to him. She adjusted her glasses, new ones, unbroken, no cracks. She said that his system still contained 847 errors, that she would work on it, that it would take her years, maybe decades. He said he was in no hurry. She nodded. She adjusted her glasses again. She turned around. She walked toward the road. She looked back twice. Abby was sitting on the roof of the tavern, with tea, as always. She was looking at the horizon. Cal climbed up to her. He sat down next to her. She said that Isolde had called off the underground movement, that reform was taking place instead of a coup, that the Church of Balance had split. Half had accepted the new tabula, half resisted, but Crow had sided with the reform, openly, publicly. The senior inquisitor, with 30 years of impeccable service, had declared before the church council that the tabel had been replaced 1,000 years ago, that the evidence was irrefutable, that he had personally verified it, that his career was a sacrifice and his faith was a sacrifice, but that truth was more important than faith. The church shuddered. It didn't collapse, it shuddered. Cal knew it shouldn't be torn down. That shudder was the beginning. Time would do the rest. Abby finished her tea. She said she was leaving. A caravan heading south. Work. Mercenary life. Habit. Cal asked if she'd be gone long. She said she'd be back. She always comes back. She looked at him, smiled, not like she does in battle. Different. Softer. She said he was the only person for whom she'd give up drinking tea. Then she jumped off the roof and left. Cal sat alone on the roof. He looked at the village, at the people, at the houses, at the smoke from the chimneys. Penny came by in the evening, wearing a clean shirt, for the 3rd time this year. Each time, a clean shirt meant something important. The first time, a hammer. The second time, a kiss on the cheek. The 3rd time, she sat down next to him on the porch and was silent for 10 minutes. Then she said she'd start working on a new project tomorrow, a mechanical inhaler for Lily, made from watch parts, based on his blueprint, the one he'd drawn 3 months ago and left on the table in the blacksmith shop. He'd thought she hadn't noticed. She had. He looked at her. She was looking at the stars. Her rust-colored hair looked coppery in the moonlight. The burn on her forearm had turned white. She said he'd changed the world, that he'd rewritten the rules, that he'd saved the village, saved Lily, saved her smithy, saved So-yeon, saved everyone. Then she said it didn't matter. Cal asked what did matter. She said what mattered was that he'd made a hammer for Lily out of a broken spoon on the 3rd day, when no one was watching, when there was no system, no rewards, no levels. Just a boy and a girl who needed a toy. Cal was silent. She was right. The system distinguished between an object and an object for a person. But that distinction worked only because he himself distinguished between them. Without a system, before the system. Because Daniel Park had spent 13 years fixing other people's games, not for a paycheck, but because he couldn't bear to see something broken and not fix it. Penny rested her head on his shoulder. Not for 3 seconds, all night long. He didn't move. The stars above Meadowbrook were bright, brighter than in Seoul, brighter than in any city in the world. The panel flashed quietly. He didn't look. No need. He knew what it said. Penny Callahan's favor. Threshold 50. Reward. Paired forging. Unique collaborative item. He smiled. Tomorrow they'd forge it, but today it was just the stars. In the morning, he stood in the square. The sun was rising above the rooftops. Alden was finally repairing the awning. Red Morton was leading a horse to the blacksmith shop. Children were running to school. Martha was opening the shutters of the tavern. Lily was sitting on the porch with a wooden bird, counting the clouds. Out loud. She gave each one a number. Cloud 1, Cloud 2, Cloud 3. Cal watched her and thought that in this world, everything is counted. Levels, experience, gold, strength. And that he too had been counting. His whole life. Both of his lives. But the best thing he'd ever done couldn't be counted. A bowl of soup on that first evening. A wooden bird for the girl. A blueprint for a blacksmith whom no one respected. 40 minutes of silence for the girl no one listened to. A home for those who'd been written off. These things didn't fit into a table. Not the original one, not the fake one, not any of them. And maybe that's exactly why they were worth $1 million. The panel flashed one last time, quietly, almost imperceptibly. A single line. System patch 0.0.1. Status, stable. Errors, 847. Recommendation, continue. He smirked. 847 errors, just like on the first day. The world has been fixed. The ledger has been rewritten. The gods have retreated. The church is being reformed. The Ashworth clan is on the hook. The village is alive. Lily is healthy. Penny is forging. So-yeon is teaching. Abby will return. Isolde is building a new order. Martha is cooking soup. And there are still 847 errors in the system. Perfect. He wouldn't have it any other way. A game designer without bugs is an unemployed game designer. He turned toward the tavern. He went inside. He sat down at a table. Martha set a bowl of soup in front of him. Hot. Thick. With potatoes and carrots. Just like that first evening. He picked up a spoon. He began to eat. Outside the window, Meadowbrook was waking up. A new day. A new world. The same 847 errors.